Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first episode and trial run of Jawbreaking News. Trial run, everybody. It is 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 8:30 Eastern on July 4th, 2026. Happy Independence Day, everybody, if you live in the U.S. My name is Jawbreaker SD. I hope you'll stay with me as we bring you stories from all around the world. As this is my first broadcast, I'd like to give you an idea of what my plans are for this show. As with any reporting of the news, I will strive to report the truth to the best of my ability, and in particular, I'd like to report on stories that you may not typically see on your TV if you live in the United States. With that said, let's get right into the show, starting with some breaking news out of Washington. As of July 4th, celebrations are underway on the nation's capital. Visitors and locals spotted hundreds of white supremacists marching through the streets. The New York Times was able to confirm the Group A's Patriot Front. Well known for previous white nationalist protests around the country, the group could be seen masked and carrying an assortment of Confederate and U.S. flags. It remains to be seen whether any violence or arrests have occurred or will occur, but many of the group's detractors online have facetiously expressed concern about the group's attire in light of the current heat advisory in the D.C. area. I'll make sure to update you any further on developments in DC today. But for now, we move to our main story of the day, the devastating double earthquakes in Venezuela. On Wednesday, the 24th of June, Venezuela was rocked by two earthquakes within 1 minute of each other. First earthquake, measured at a 7.2 magnitude, hit at 6:04 p.m. local time, with the second quake coming seconds later, measuring 7.5 magnitude. The devastation was immediately apparent as videos poured onto social media displayed crumbling buildings and cityscapes in ruin. Families broken, homes destroyed, critical infrastructure crippled. As of July 4th, the confirmed death toll has risen to almost 3,000, as reported by Reuters. Initial estimates by U.S. officials estimated 10,000 to 100,000 deaths were possible. The UN's humanitarian coordinator, Gianluca Rampolla, said in a briefing on July 1st that 10,000 body bags had been procured in agreement with Venezuela's government. Rampolla added that they truly hope the actual number is going to be smaller than that. Now, over a week after the quakes, NPR is reporting that anger is growing among the public as the US-backed government of Venezuela has drawn criticism for slow and inadequate response to the disaster. Locals in the most affected areas, such as Los Corrales in the state of La Guaira, have reported to NPR that they don't have enough body bags or supplies to recover bodies. Local volunteers and family members are digging with their hands to search the rubble of fallen buildings and covering the bodies with anything they can get their hands on, including plastic sheets and garbage bags. Slowly, as army and police personnel have arrived in the hardest hit areas, it is being reported by locals that roadblocks are being set up with requests for permits from medical and rescue workers. Reports from the BBC tell a story of over 100 deportees from the United States to Venezuela missing after the hotel used as a base for processing collapsed during the earthquakes. The deportees had arrived in Venezuela earlier that same day. As human beings, we search for dim glimmers of hope shining through even the deepest, darkest nights. And more often than not, shimmering through the darkness, come stories of survival. Early Thursday morning, July 2nd, rescuers pulled 43-year-old Hernan Alberto Gil Flores from the rubble of a complex he worked security for. AP News reports that the contact was made with Gil Flores over the weekend, with food and drink deliveries occurring to keep him alive during the more than 100 hours of excavation that followed. Gil Flores was taken to a waiting ambulance to receive care. Cheers and applause could be heard from the groups of rescuers. A rare moment of hope beaming through a tragedy. I will continue to cover this story as recovery efforts progress in Venezuela. I'd like to take this time to thank all of the volunteers and rescue workers who dedicate their time and their lives to helping those in need. Last night in New York City, a Tibetan protester, Logba Rangsen, set himself aflame near the United Nations headquarters. NBC reports that Rangsen was an activist appealing for Tibetan independence and unity, rebuking China's ethnic unity law which creates a shared national identity for 55 ethnic minority groups in the country. China seized control of Tibet in 1950 and has drawn international criticism repeatedly for its treatment of Tibetans and other minorities. July 4th has always been a day of large celebrations in the United States, but this year it was set to be even more grandiose. This year marks the 250th anniversary of American independence, with years of planning behind it, including congressional approval of resources and planning committees. Still, in recent months, criticism has been levied at the celebrations due to the president's executive order replacing the planning committee with its own Freedom 250 committee. Multiple headlining artists pulled out of their contracts to perform at the Great American State Fair in Washington, causing the president to bill himself as the main attraction with a speech to open the fair, calling himself the, quote, #1 attraction anywhere in the world, end quote. The first week of the fair was lauded by the administration as a great success with thousands of visitors, but posts on social media and shots from news broadcasts seem to paint a different story. Now, as the fair prepares for the big day of celebration, Mother Nature has made herself known. On Friday, the temperature reached a staggering 102 degrees Fahrenheit, or 39 Celsius, with temperatures on Independence Day expected to be similar. The National Weather Service recommends hourly breaks in air conditioning if you plan on being outside, and limiting alcohol consumption as it can exacerbate dehydration. If you plan on celebrating, please be careful and have a good night. A wedding has taken place at Madison Square Garden. NBC reports that guest turnout was expected to be over 1,000, with all guests being sent non-disclosure agreements and prohibited from bringing phones into the venue. Crews have been spotted this morning setting up black screen fences near Madison Square Garden, apparently at the guest arrival area. The wedding has been highly anticipated since the couple's engagement in August of last year. I'd like to wish both of them a great wedding and a happy life together. Team USA faced off against Bosnia and Herzegovina on Wednesday in a well-fought match. The match was decided by 2 USA goals to Bosnia and Herzegovina's 0. Baloran Balogun scored the game's first goal in the 45th minute on a contested deflection just inside the penalty box. This would prove to be the decider after full time, but Team USA's Malik Tillman would later score some insurance with a free kick goal in the 82nd minute. This despite being a man down after a controversial red card was given to Balogun after VAR review. Team USA is set to face Belgium in the round of 16 without one of their star players. In other World Cup news, Cabo Verde stuns the football world with a nail-biting loss to Argentina on Friday. The small island nation is the smallest to ever make the knockout round and was largely praised for their 3 draws in the group stages, allowing them to qualify for the knockout round. No one seemed to put much thought into any chance of Cabo Verde upsetting the defending champions, but predictions aren't results, and there is a reason why the game is played. The game went into extra time where Argentina would narrowly escape with the win after an equalizer from Cabo Verde was answered with another Argentina goal. The final score was 3-2. The end of Cinderella's story, but Cabo Verde made their mark in one of the greatest matches you will ever see. Team USA vs. Belgium is set for July 6th at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Moving on to my favorite segment of the show, news from around the world. A rare copy of the United States Declaration of Independence was found in the United Kingdom National Archive on Friday. PBS reports that a retired insurance executive, Michael Skerr, had been volunteering at the archive cataloging documents to assist future researchers. While sifting through letters from a 1700s Royal Navy captain, Skerr found the declaration attached to a report on the capture of an American privateer, Dalton. This is one of just 11 original copies of the Exeter printing of the document that still survive, and is the only one outside of the United States. It was printed at some point between July 16th and 19th in 1776, just days after the original document was adopted by the Continental Congress. An exciting find for a volunteer archivist, just in time for the nation's 250th anniversary. In what has become one of the nation's favorite Independence Day traditions, the Nathan's famous 4th of July hot dog eating contest was held today on the country's 250th birthday. It wouldn't quite be the 4th of July without Joey Chestnut gobbling past all others to win his 18th Nathan's famous hot dog eating contest. He inhaled a staggering 66 hot dogs this year, with the women's champion, Miki Sudo, also defending her title with 38 3/4 hot dogs. Chestnut told reporters after his victory that he knew he was going to win and that he has so much room left. While factual reporting is the hallmark of journalism, I find it cathartic and constructive to offer opinion on occasion. In this case, I feel the need to comment on the rise in popularity of socialism in the United States. Far removed from the Red Scare, fears of communism still run rampant in older generations of the country, while the younger generations seem to be embracing it. While my opinions on democratic socialism are positive, especially when it comes to access to healthcare and government assistance programs, I feel the need to explain why the sudden rise in popularity is likely less about socialism than it is about the Democratic Party. Since before the first election of Donald Trump, the Democratic Party has been floundering in a post-Obama void. Obama was an inspired leader who the party lucked into after his speech at the Democratic National Convention captured the eyes of the nation. Even with his popularity came detractors who would have preferred other, more experienced candidates. After Obama's terms ended, the pendulum of politics swung back towards Republicans. But the Democrats, instead of playing hardball and putting forward a risky, fresh candidate to try and dampen the pendulum swing, put forward Hillary Clinton, a career politician with mountains of skeletons in the closet and who, frankly, was never massively popular with a wide coalition of voters. The party also managed to magnify Donald Trump in the primary with free publicity that ended up winning him the nomination. So, when the pendulum swung back, voters chose to go with something new, and they rejected Hillary Clinton as the corrupt status quo. Fast forward to Joe Biden's victory, which was largely won due to the horrible handling of the pandemic by Trump. The entire campaign was purely anti-Trump rhetoric, with little to no coalition building behind a candidate. The party dragged old man Biden out of retirement, knowing full well how old he would be if he tried to run for a second term. When he ultimately bowed out of running extremely late into the process, robbing the party of a proper primary, Kamala Harris was the only option for voters. At best, this looks like terrible planning, which would leave Harris with limited time to engage voters and try to win the election. At worst, it looks like a sleazy play to guarantee the vice president as the nominee. I am a young voter. By the time Trump leaves office, if he ever does, he will have been politically relevant for over half my life. Half of my life of nonstop crazy from a wannabe tyrant who is only here because the Democratic Party doesn't have a clue. The Democrats enabled a group of politicians inside and outside of their party whose only goal is to enrich themselves by any means necessary, regardless of the wishes of their voters. Polling data has shown for over a decade that voters are disillusioned with the party and with the political system as a whole. And instead of making changes to appeal to voters, the Democratic Party has abandoned them. So when the Democratic Socialists of America came along and promised to fix things, no wonder people jumped on board. And now Zoran Mamdani has fulfilled a large portion of his promises within 6 months of taking office. I don't think there is any going back. Voters in New York reaffirmed their desire for change this primary. Colorado showed the same. So why is socialism on the rise? Because socialists give a shit. So now we move on to a more impromptu part of the show where I run through some midterm election simulations with you. We've got a cool tool where I can do that, and we can use that here. Alrighty, here's my cool tool. Scott, we've already run one simulation here. I think we're 50% of the way through election night. It basically runs the simulation. You can run it at a certain time through. It's best if I show you. Here's our parameters. You can choose how far away from poll close we basically are, what percentage the votes are counting. 50% being basically midnight, where the East Coast is in and the West Coast hasn't been in for that long. 25%. These early stuff is like just the West Coast is in, and then you get all the way to 100%. You have national partisan swing. This is kind of the term we use to evaluate which way we think the nation's leaning. So in the last election, this would have been at least a few points Republican. It tends to be anywhere from 3 to 5 towards whichever party is more popular that election cycle. It can also be extremely close and not swing that much, though. Typically with elections, it'll swing one way or the other, typically the opposite way of whoever's in power. So in this case, the expectation, at least from me, is anywhere from a 2 to 4% Democratic swing. A 10 would be a huge wave. It likely wouldn't happen. I've been sitting at 3 for the percentage, 4 if I want to be optimistic. But here's 3. Early night GOP bias. This term doesn't really do anything right now. All this does is it will, for the percentage here, the election night progress, it does affect this. Most of the simulations we'll be doing are at 100%, so this term won't matter as much. But for times like 50%, this will show that red mirage, as the news likes to call it, where the Republican votes are in earlier because they're counted on election day. A lot of states will count election day votes first and wait to count their mail-in votes until later, or the mail-in votes are allowed to come in after election day and still be counted as long as they're postmarked before election day. So you'll get up to, it tends to be aroundish 3 percentage points depending on where you are. You'll get about 3 percentage points of early bias in that red mirage. So that accounts for that. And it can vary a lot. It's hard to predict because it really depends on the elections of that year and the amount of voters for each party. And the age is a big one. Young voters tend to vote closer to election day, and they tend to vote by mail. All right, and then there is state level variation. This one is such a important one and really hard to nail down. It is the main thing that drives this simulation. These are state level variation. It tends to be, for the Senate, you have anywhere from 2 to 4% typical variation in the difference between national voting, who's going Democrat or Republican nationally, just kind of generally who's voting who, to how different that can be in each state. So, for example, a 3.5 percentage point, let's say, that means that there is about 3.5 percentage point variation that will get typically between the national vibe of voting and whichever particular state we're in. And the House tends to be more volatile than that because it is more hyper-localized. It's anywhere from like 3 to 6 or more. It can get kind of crazy. And then down here, we just have a seed. If we want to reproduce the same results over the course of an election night, we copy the seed it gives us, and then we can run it multiple times, which we might end up doing. But what we're going to do first is I am just going to run a 100% simulation plus 3 Democratic lead, 3-point GOP bias, which won't matter because we're at 100%, and then a state level variation of 3.5, 5.5, which is kind of middle of the road-ish. And let's simulate it. It can take a second. Not totally certain I pressed it correctly, so I don't want to. There we are. All right. So with this, and keep in mind, with that variation, it can change quite a bit. So what we have here, it can be a little tough looking at the Senate results because the House is much easier to look at because every single House seat goes every single election. So there's always an election for every single House seat. So it's pretty simple. The darker the blue, the more House seats. The darker the red, the more House seats they have. And then if you get gray, it's a split. Pretty simple. With the Senate, it's tough to represent because there are a lot of states, California, Washington, Nevada, Arizona, that don't have Senate races this midterms because it's only every 6 years. So you'll get most of the time. So most of all the states, and this midterms, actually every state only has one Senate election. So this map is deceiving. Because if you have a state, I feel like there's a good example. You get purple on this, by the way, if you have no election like you do in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, and they're split, one Republican, one Democrat in the Senate. But you'll end up with situations where there's only one election. So you could imagine Pennsylvania, if the Republican doesn't have an election this cycle, but the Democrat does, and the Democrat wins that election, then this state would show blue. And it would show blue based on whatever percentage. I apologize, I keep looking up there. This is where my camera is, but you're here. So this would show whatever percentage blue. So like lighter blue, if it's close, I imagine it would be. It's Pennsylvania. It would show lighter blue because the Democrat's winning. But there's a Republican also in that seat, so it doesn't really represent well the map here. What I like to look at more is our stuff down here. We have chamber control prediction. Since we're at 100%, it's not a prediction anymore. This just shows who's winning. With this percentage, I will say at 3%, it tends to be more often than not that Republicans still win the House. They're almost always still winning the Senate. They just have a huge advantage on which elections are this cycle. So they're almost always going to win the Senate. The push Democrats would need to hit to win the Senate would be ridiculous. But there is a path, but it includes winning Texas, which historically not going to happen. But Ken Paxton's extremely unpopular. So and Tallarico seems to have a coalition behind him. But you've heard it a million times. Texas could go blue this time. It is probably not going to happen. So Republicans will almost certainly hold on to the Senate. Democrats have a real fighting chance at the House, but it could still be very close in a very slim majority if they do win it. In this case, they have it at a 218, 217. Very, very close, just razor-thin margin. And given the average age of a House of Representatives congressperson, one death, and then it's tied, and it's a mess. But anyway, down here, this is the race is called. The reason this is only 33 states is that's all the elections. There are 17 senators who don't have an election this semester. Jesus, this midterm. So this is only the called races, and as you can see, a lot of the Senate races are in just pretty solidly Republican districts. It's a lot of Arkansas. It's a lot of Nebraska, South Dakota, Idaho. A lot of that going on. And as a note, we don't know all the candidates in every state yet. Like, we know it's going to be Paxton versus Tallarico in Texas, but for some place like Oregon, and keep in mind all this data is from like a week ago now or so. So like Colorado, we know Colorado now. I do believe it's Hickenlooper. Was it Hickenlooper? I don't know. This does have to be updated because there has been a primary in Colorado. But they're basically, when we don't know for sure, we go based off an incumbent if it's available, or who's the leading candidate in the primary polls currently, or we just come up with one and then we just run it anyway. So if it has a bunch of stuff next to someone's name, it's because we don't know if they're going to be the candidate, but we're just assuming generic person from that party. So let's look at this. We have a fun graphic, and this is my favorite thing down here, is chamber control prediction. Basically, this tracks this. So the chance of majority throughout an election night. And you'll see the Senate basically never was anything. They were pretty much 75% sure. And then as you get later, you get more sure because more votes are in and you see the way it's going. The House is where it gets interesting, because you run into this situation where it's still leaning Republican because it seems like election-wise it is kind of going their way. based on history. So based on the last election, which is how this model works. It factors in past elections and current data that's coming in. So early on, the chances will lean very I'm still looking up there. I need to like just block this off. So in the past, so we look at the 2024 election for the House, and we take all of that data. So early on, they go off that and they do statistics and still like guessing the way it's going to move and stuff. They still predict that it was 55% going to go Republicans' way. But as votes come in and you see that Democratic shift come in and it begins to converge, you start to see they're very close. Republicans are still on top. And then it gets a little chaotic at the end because there's a lot of close races and you don't know exactly what's going to happen. I'm still looking into exactly if this is a data fault or just the way that the statistics is generating this information, and seeing if I can refine that, because it pushing out at the end and then flipping is something I've seen happen. But it could also just be a result of the fact that there's an independent. Sorry, I didn't even realize there was an independent in the House. Where? I'm so curious now. Who's the independent? I don't have this clickable. Who's the independent? Okay, hold on. This is a total tangent, but I'm looking into fixing that. So we do have some other cool pages, actually. This is just the dashboard page, and then you saw the simulation page earlier. We have the Senate races. This is literally a list of all the Senate races, all 33 of them. And you'll see we have the state, obviously, the status if it's called, we're at 100%, so it's called, obviously. The percent in, we're at 100%, so it's 100%. And then we have the leader and the trailer. Same thing as the map here. If it's a set candidates, it'll say that. If not, it'll tell you kind of what it's guessing. And then it gives you the margin. So if we want to like sort by margin, by smaller margin, it looks like the closest in this was Minnesota. That makes sense. Minnesota tends to be fairly close, but it looks like it still went the Democrats' way. But a place like North Carolina also tends to be fairly close, but also tends to lean right with those close elections. It looks like Roy Cooper was not going to win it in this one. And then Michigan looks like it actually went Republican this way as well. And then Montana was weirdly close. I actually do want to look into that. But we also have this for the House, the same page also for the House. This one can get a little bit messy because there's 435 of them. So if we sort by margin, it lists all the states first. I have to fix that. But then it tells us how close some of these races can get. This makes perfect sense. Lauren Boebert was, she's not going to be the Republican nominee. We don't know who it is yet, or at least the system couldn't find it because I have to go off public data, and 435, I can't get it manually. And it's updating because primaries are still going on. So Lauren Boebert was the candidate. Is she retired, or was it Marjorie Taylor Greene that retired? I know Marjorie Taylor Greene did. I don't know if Boebert's still going to run. I don't remember. Either way, in her last election, she won by literally like 300 votes. Like, it was extremely close. So this having her win by 16 votes is pretty insane. But tracks historically. Interesting. Wow, there's a lot of really close ones. But I mean, there's 435. There's going to be close House elections. That's how it goes statistically. Right, so out of that, who's still counting? No one. Okay, glitch. And then this is the last page we have that we're going to be looking at for now, which is compare and predict. This one can be really useful. This is where I'll want to look at Montana that I was mentioning before. This is where you can compare. It's the page where you can compare the last election that this seat had versus the current one. It's weird that it's on the right and left, but it works. So like 2020 was the last time this Senate seat had an election 6 years ago. That tends to be how it works. And in that election, it went 54.7, 44 for Republicans. And it's Montana. That sounds about right. 10-point difference, almost 11. Sounds about right. Now, in the way that these simulate, the 3.5 percentage points that it has for the Senate and how much it can vary, that creates, it's a statistical standard deviation. So you will get outlier situations where people will massively overperform. So in this case, that is what's happening. This is Montana. I do not expect a Democrat to get within 3 points in Montana. I don't see it happening. It would have to be a massive shift. Like you see it shifted 8.3 points. Like that's huge. That's a huge difference. Still lost, but that's a huge push. If you saw an 8.3 in Montana, that would be a huge tell that Republicans are going to lose probably both houses. If you saw that, that's unless there's something special going on in Montana with the Republican candidate, like he gets convicted of murder or something, like you would see them like it'd be ridiculous of a blue wave, but it's not going to happen. So it's called, it tells you the previous margin versus the net swing and everything, and then it gives you the win probability again, but this time it gives you a per state one. I love this. So what you can see here is exactly what I was saying. It's like, oh yeah, it's Montana. They're going to win Montana. So like you guess that based off of the last election, and then slowly over the course of the night, it gets closer and closer and closer and closer and closer, and it doesn't quite cross because he doesn't win, but this is that effect of two things: more votes coming in, and with that comes the red mirage. So you'll get a lot of Republican votes at first, but even then you can see that first wave of votes comes in and it's like, ooh, that's not as Republican as I was expecting, but it still kind of stays flat, and then as the night goes on you get more and more Democrat votes comparatively to earlier in the night, and it converges. That's that red mirage effect. So the other one, as I wanted to look at House of Representatives, Colorado District 3, which is Boebert from the last election. Yeah, here's her last election, the 50.1 to 49.9. It's a super rural Colorado district, but it's like half the state area-wise. It's huge. And look at this. They knew right away, based off the last one, this was going to be as close as a House election can get, because it is every time. Especially with how relatively unpopular Boebert is with moderate voters. Like it's a little crazy. But this, I'm honestly a little surprised that it didn't take some wild swings in this graph. I apologize. It looks like the graphic is covering it just a little bit. There's not a whole lot I can do about it right now, though. Yeah, I'm surprised it didn't take some wild swings, because as you get closer, I guess since if it started wider and then it got really close, like if it ended this close and started as a wide, like we thought one party or the other was going to win, and then it ends this close, then you would see some really big swings in the probability, because it's expecting there to be a big difference. So when there's not, it overcorrects and it will swing back and forth, and it can be a whole thing. But that makes sense just because of the way that the math works out on it. All right. I think I'm just going to run through one more simulation with you. And this one I'm going to simulate just freaking all out 6 percentage points. This would be probably best case scenario for Democrats with the 3% early night bias. This is 100% in still. I'm going to keep the variation the same. That can be a little bit more important to switch around, but since I only really got time for one more, I'm going to hit you with this one, and let's see how it runs. Oh, I'm out of full screen. I don't know. When did that happen? Looking up there. I'm not up there. Or you're not up there. You're up here. I'm up there. Ugh. All right, so we've run it again. Let's go House, see how it went. Oh, and as you can see, wow. They didn't win Texas. What did they win to get this? Interesting. They still lost Texas by a lot, but they won Montana. Okay, so that's not happening. Let's see here then. They won Iowa. Interesting now. Interesting. Okay. Okay, well, let's look at it. Let's look at the chance. Oh, and you see the big switch there. And I'm sure I can tell you that's probably Montana is what that is. That's or no, what's the really close one? That's Iowa switching right at the end, because you don't know which way that's going. And it's South Carolina, which there's no freaking way they're winning. I would say they'd win Texas and Florida before they won South Carolina. Interesting. And kind of Iowa, honestly. Yeah. But the House went their way big. That's the thing with relying on statistics only and not like polling data, which I don't have access to really, or at least any decent polling data, and it would be worthless within a week. That's what's tough about it. So when I'm doing these, by the way, this is including the 2 independents. So that is Bernie Sanders and I'm forgetting his name, King or something. But you'll see in the House control started a lot closer than you'd think, and it pretty immediately looked like it was a Democratic wave there, which is exactly how this would go. But I am curious to see, Montana, Iowa. Let's look at Iowa real quick. Iowa Senate. Wow, 6.5 points. Wow, I didn't know Iowa was that close. I didn't know Iowa was almost 6 points only. God, Iowa's just one of those places I kind of assume is pretty deeply red, but you forget a lot of the Midwest is like, it's less deep red than you'd think. It's pretty solidly red, but it's not like the percentages aren't crazy. It's like how Texas is like, it's always like, more than 5 points, but like, it's never very much more than 5 points for like statewide stuff. There's a lot of people there who are voting Democrat, and it's closer than people think. But anywho, yeah, you can see this one swapped over right at the end. This is the kind of thing that switches that probability and makes it jump around very, very often. Oh God, I forgot I even built this in. It gives me actual numbers. Perfect. Okay, so now we're on to something new. This is the long-term simulations. So basically what this is it allows me to run a continuous simulation. So the progress is at 100%. The early bias stays at 3. Doesn't matter because we're running at 100%. And then it randomizes the swing. It randomizes the state noise and the district noise, meaning that, I can, and I'm going to, run these simulations continuously, and I'll leave you basically. So with these simulations, the whole goal is to kind of show you, and it gives you those numbers on the bottom. It's a little small. I can work on that in the vertical version. I think it's a little better. But basically what the goal is here is to give you a little bit of an idea of how these how this election could go statistically and the different ways that it can go. And you'll see that on the maps. Like I said, the Senate one's not as useful, but the House one can be very useful because it will tell you exactly, the color will tell you exactly how this election's gone. But with that said, I am going to have to say goodbye. This was very fun. I appreciate you being here. This was very fun. I enjoyed it. I hope I get to keep doing this. But for now, I am going to leave you with those randomly generated simulations. Thank you all for joining me on this first trial of Jawbreaking News. Have a great night. And for my friends in the United States, I wish you a very happy Independence Day.